Hello and welcome to the Nutrient Nirvana History, Health and Wellbeing channel. I'm Paul, your host, and today I'm joined once again by one of my favourite health researchers, Clive De Carle. How are you, Clive?
Hello, Paul. Yeah, fine. Brilliant. Thank you very much. How about you?
Not too bad, mate. Not too bad at all, actually. We've not spoken for about 8 or 9 months now, I think. So I've got loads of things to ask you and talk to you about. Um, so before I start firing questions at you left, right, and centre, is there anything on your radar at the moment? Anything that you're excited about? Anything that you're worried about, disturbed about? Anything at all?
Worried about, disturbed about? Well, the world's perfect. No problems out there. Everybody's doing just fine. So that's not a problem. On the health front, I went to a conference this weekend, which was really interesting. I'm getting an echo. Are you getting an echo?
No, I don't think I am. No.
Okay. So it was mainly about peptides, and peptides are small groups of amino acids. When we eat protein, we break it down into amino acids and peptides, and then our body puts the peptides and amino acids back together again to build muscle and us, basically. So back in the 70s, the Soviet secret soldier program was not only investigating frequency devices, which I think a lot of people know about, but they were investigating substances that could be used to protect anybody in battlefields. The Russian spies had worked out the Americans had a blinding laser, so absolute top priority for Russian soldiers was to have, if they were blinded, their retinas were burnt, how could they repair their retinas quickly and successfully? And they discovered, putting infinite amounts of money into the research, they employed a guy called Dr. Vladimir Kavinson, who was speaking at this event, who over 40 years ago developed the retinal repair peptide. Incredible discovery. And since then, there are about 25 more peptides that have been discovered. The best-selling one, the most important one, which a lot of people wouldn't guess, is the pineal gland peptide, because the pineal gland controls sleep, rest, it controls the cosmic connection, it controls it's it has it creates melatonin, serotonin, lots of happy stuff goes on there. And if you've got enough melatonin, then you're unlikely to have a cancer risk. All sorts of fabulous advantages to the melatonin pineal gland peptide. Then there are ones for lungs and kidneys and eyes and hearts and brains, and most organs have got a peptide. And the anti-aging effect of these is well proven, hugely well proven, increasing lifespan by a third or more. And
Wow.
because this was Soviet research, they didn't just test on like 60 people in a trial. They tested on thousands of people for 20 years.
Hmm.
Massive research on peptides, and people don't realize how powerful peptides are, because it's not like a supplement where you take it every day. With peptides, you may be, let's say you are wanting to prevent a problem. Well, you might take peptides for 10 days, then you might take the next 6 months off and then do another 10-day course and another six months off, because what they are, peptides are gene switches. Doctors are taught that your genes determine your fate, and there's nothing you can do about it. This is absolute rubbish. Of course, by what you eat, what you think, what you do, you can alter your genetics. You can either express a gene in an unpleasant way, or you could express the gene in a beneficial way. And just, there are lots of herbs that do that. Ashwagandha, there are all sorts of herbs which are adaptogens. They help your body adapt to whatever situation you're in. And the peptides are a bit like that. They allow your body to just return to the way it should be. And so one of the lectures was from a dentist who touched part of his lecture was about the work that the Japanese and others are doing with peptides to regrow cavities. Because if you've just got a cavity, well, you can regrow it. Even without peptides, you can regrow a cavity if you understand what the cause is. And I'll just briefly digress onto that. You probably might have heard me say this before, but you cut your finger, well, a healing has to occur. It's going to get hot and, inflamed, and that burns the bacteria off. Healing, inflammation is healing, if you see what I mean. Doctors say, oh, you're inflamed, that's wrong, let's turn it off. Well, no, that's actually the body's healing process. So you know what happens. You get a cavity in your hand, you cut it open with a knife, well, it'll heal up. Cavity in your fingernail, you break your fingernail, it'll heal up. Cavity in your tooth, oh my God, we've got to drill big holes in the tooth and fill it up with artificial materials. No, hang on a minute. Your teeth are regrowing all the time. They're not these dead things stuck there. So, well, regrow it then. So when you cut your finger, you didn't pour coffee on it and rub food into it. You left it alone, kept it sterile. If you did the same with your mouth and you had enough of the raw materials to build a new tooth, i.e. you've got enough minerals and vitamins and you're eating well enough that you can repair, then just like your fingernail, it'll grow back. What's the problem? So I went, when I was working with a medical doctor years ago, he said, I woke up one morning and I was in pain. Suddenly a cavity arrived. And he said, well, there's an ozone dentist around the corner who does ozone treatment for dentists. Go around there. He'll blow some ozone in the hole. That'll keep it sterile. Then he'll tell you what to eat and what not to eat. And the tooth cavity will grow back. It did. So now they're working, scientists all over the place are working with peptides to regrow teeth because you can speed the process up by putting a peptide in there. I'm trying, they gave me a free sample of one of the tooth serums. There's so much development going on around the world right now around peptides. There are people, well, let me give you another example. One of the medical doctors at this conference, they weren't all medical doctors, but a lot were, he's a surgeon. He operates on knees and hips and so on, but not anymore. He doesn't, or not in the same way. He doesn't replace hip joints or knee joints anymore. What they do is they take out about 10 mil of your blood, 10 cc's, whatever it is, of your blood, and they put it in a machine for about 24 hours and do stuff to it. And at the end of 24 hours, it's now a little solid lump of blood. And they take a scalpel and they cut off little tiny slivers of this. Then, let's say it's a knee joint, they make 3 little incisions at certain points around the knee, just 2 or 3 millimeters, tiny, and they put the little sliver of blood in, and that triggers stem cells to regrow the cartilage and bone and joint. Wow. Yeah. So they've been doing this at the University of Rome. This doctor now works at Worthing Hospital. He's Italian. His name is Valerio Di Nicola. Valerio Di Nicola. And the operation, if you were to do it privately, is about 1/10 of the price of a knee operation or a hip operation. It's super cheap. It's not much to it. And people get better really quickly. And at least a couple of thousand people have been successfully treated now over a few years. And your local GP will find out about it in about 2050.
Yeah, I was going to say actually, what would the reaction be to peptides with the mainstream medical?
Well, they don't know what a peptide is, I would suspect.
Yeah, I think I told you a little while ago, I visited my doctor a couple of years ago to try and get my vitamin D levels checked. And he asked me, why are you doing that? And I said, well, because we're going into flu season and I'd like to know what my levels are. I like to sort of gauge how my immune system is functioning. And he said to me, vitamin D has nothing to do with the immune system. It's good for your bones, but it's got nothing to do with your immune system. And I couldn't believe it. I really was absolutely floored.
Well, it's not his fault. He is ignorant and has been deliberately misled, lied to, and told that your body goes wrong, give it a drug and hope for the best.
Yeah,
It's not
crazy.
their fault that they're
Yeah.
in the position they're in. I mean, I'm
Exactly.
being nice, obviously.
Okay. Talking of the peptides, the effects sound a little bit similar to nanosoma. Would
Well,
I be
again,
correct?
all these things, like the adaptogens, are just materials to help your body work as it normally should. But
Mm,
because we're poisoned and nutrient deficient and so on, we need a kick from time to time
mm,
to remind our body what to do, either on an informational level or on a physical, nutritional type level.
mm,
And we're all, me included, we're all low on nutrients.
mm.
We're all
Yeah,
not getting the fresh food we ought to, that kind of stuff.
absolutely. So are these peptides on the market at the moment?
Yes, yes, yes. I've had them on my website for a while.
Oh, okay.
Just go down the list and you'll see peptides, and it opens up to about 25 different ones. Most people take maybe 2 or 3 types at a time.
Mm,
I'm currently taking 4. I'm taking the retinol peptide, I'm taking the pineal, I'm taking the thymus, and I'm taking the blood circulation
mm,
one. Thymus is the one you'd want to do for the immune system, for example. And I have in the past done one for lungs and other things.
mm,
So you can do it a few at a time. So if I say 10 days is fine, but some people might want to do a month course, or if they've got a serious issue that they wanted to deal with, they might want to do a 2-month course and then stop for 6 months.
mhm.
But there's lots of information. I can show you something. So here's a book, the Peptides in the Epigenetic Control of Aging.
Okay.
Then there's this one, bearing in mind it's Russian, The Peptide Revolution.
Wow. Okay.
And these are books that are available.
Yeah.
One of the other speakers, Dr. Marios Kyriasis, he wrote this book, The Eyesight Saviors, and he and others are getting incredible results reversing not just retinal issues, but macular degeneration, and one that most ophthalmologists around the world say is impossible, which is retinitis pigmentosa.
Mhm.
And they are clinically proven reversing, to a very large extent, maybe not completely, retinitis pigmentosa. Just because the doctor says it's impossible
Mm.
doesn't mean that it is impossible. It just means he doesn't know or she doesn't know how to do it. That's all.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Um, I've actually suffered with Raynaud's syndrome for about 10 years now. So, um, would blood circulation peptides help me out with that, do you think? I'm obviously taking magnesium, iodine, Vit C, Vit D, etc. And I've noticed this year that my Raynaud's, as it's got colder outside, seems to be better than it has been previously. And I've been putting that down to magnesium. But would the blood circulation peptides help me out with that?
Well, I've not had direct experience with a client who's had Raynaud's and used them. So, but I would assume so.
Mm, mm.
And you can ring up the manufacturers who'll happily talk to you and ask them. But I would say yes. But I would say that iodine would be the thing that I would say is likely to have the most positive influence for you.
Why would
Iodine, along with selenium.
okay? Why is that, Clive?
Well, iodine controls the thyroid. Thyroid controls temperature control,
Mm, mm, sure.
and so if you're feeling it in your fingertips and so on, then iodine would be the place to start. And you've got the Lugol's, I think. And how
Yes,
many drops have you been using? How many days?
well, I've got it down now to about, I'd say, 20 drops every 10 days on skin. And that seems to be working okay.
So that's almost nothing.
Well,
20,
sorry, I go by how quickly it absorbs,
and how
and
quickly does it absorb?
Well, sometimes I'm waking up the following day after applying it at night, and I can still see very faintly a stain on my arm.
Well, this is good, but it's not 100% reliable as a test.
Right. Okay.
I would suggest you just experiment. It's very difficult to do harm with Lugol's iodine. You know, back in the day, they were giving doses that are way, way bigger than we're talking about.
Yeah.
I would suggest if you tried 6 to 8 drops in water, drink it. You know, anybody listening who wants to try it, they need to study this subject and start with 1 drop and build up. And 5 days a week, if you, with Raynaud's, were to do 5 days a week for, let's say, 6 weeks, 6 to 8 drops in water, along with the liquid selenium that's on my site, you might find a dramatic result. But you see, for every 8 drops you paint on your skin, 7 are going to evaporate or something like that.
Yeah.
So 20 drops now becomes, let's say, 3 drops if you're lucky. And that's not enough every 2 weeks, not to deal with a thyroid issue or or a deficiency. Really, it's just not enough.
Okay, yeah. I was going to ask you about selenium as well, because I don't actually take selenium. I do eat Brazil nuts every now and again, and I eat salmon and bacon, which I believe have good levels of selenium in. But if I'm going to up my iodine like that, I'll be completely honest with you, Clive. I love the look of your targeted selenium on your website. I've read about it a few times, and I realised they were having amazing results. I think it was back in the 80s with drug addicts in New York, I think it was, getting them off heroin. It looks like a fabulous supplement. At the moment, however, I'll be completely honest, it's slightly out of my price range, out of my budget. So if outside of that, I've looked into other selenium supplements, but there seems to be quite a bit of conjecture about how effective or bioavailable they might be. So what would my best bet be? I mean, how important is it if somebody's going to take iodine long term? Do they need to definitely be taking selenium at the same time as well?
No, they don't have to, but it would really help if they did.
Right.
I
So
see people who
there's no
haven't.
danger of the selenium levels decreasing as the iodine goes up and you becoming deficient in
Well, no,
selenium.
it's just that there are some areas where the soil has almost no selenium all over the world, and with modern farming methods, there's less than there was. But some places, some counties, whole counties, have very low levels of selenium, and anybody who's got fibromyalgia, anybody who's got, they're tired all the time, could well be selenium deficiency. Could well be. Huge areas in America where there isn't enough selenium in the soil. So, but you see, there are certain types of selenium you can buy out there online or whatever that basically are not, as you say, not very bioavailable and not really great. There's the best one, apart from mine, is called selenomethionine.
Yeah.
That works pretty well, and you could probably buy a bottle of that, I don't know, for 10 quid or something. My one is 100 quid, but it lasts a year. So actually, long term, it's
Right.
actually fine value.
Sure.
The problem is it comes in, I haven't got one in here, but it comes in a bottle like this size, and it's so small that if we didn't do a year's worth, or because we can't dilute it, it's to be taken neat, you wouldn't be able to read the label. So, but also, if somebody's going to come off a prescription drug or a non-prescription drug and they're an addict, booze or whatever, then they want to take a high dose for about 3 days. So normally the dose would be one drop every 1 or 2 days. But somebody trying to come off something, I had somebody who tried for 18 years to come off their ADHD medication, could never do it. 3 days later, on 7 drops a day, came off the ADHD medication first time in 20 years, no problem.
Wow, that's
But
incredible.
other people who've taken between 10 and 20 drops for 3 days and come off booze or what have you. There are other things to do as well if you're going to come off things like amino acids and fulvic minerals and vitamin C and charcoal and stuff. But selenium is absolutely incredible at turning off antitoxins. So somebody gives up booze, gives up heroin, the body hasn't worked out they've stopped. So the body's been taking in this toxin and making antitoxins to try and deal with it. So you suddenly stop the toxin, and the antitoxins are why people get the DTs, why people get cold turkey. It's not the lack of the drug, it's the antitoxins that are hurting them. So selenium does a great job at neutralizing the antitoxins. I mean, selenium does loads of things. It's incredibly important. But taking the two together, I mean, I would say that 90% of people are probably low on iodine anyway. So, a year's worth of iodine, which is again one bottle, is 20 quid.
Yep.
Year's worth of selenium 100. So 120 quid, you might be able to sort out your thyroid. You might be able to get your temperature control right. Anybody who walks in a room and forgets why they walked in, compared to a few years ago when they could remember, they're going to be low on iodine. It's just so common. Anybody with dry skin, probably low on iodine. Anybody who's got menopause, probably low on iodine. I may have mentioned on a previous show that in the Japanese language, they don't have a word for menopause because Japanese women don't get breast cancer hardly at all, and don't usually get menopause because of all the iodine in the seaweed.
Yeah, absolutely. Just moving back to iodine for a moment, should we be drinking it in water, as you suggest? I've normally recommended to people that they paint it on the skin because I was under the impression that if you're drinking it regularly, it could interfere with the good bacteria in your gut because it's antibacterial. So is that a myth, or is there any truth to that?
Well, a lot of people have been using iodine for a long time, and we are physiologically, we require iodine. I mean, think about back in the day. In England, in winter, there's not a lot to eat. So most people lived by a river where they could catch fish, or lived by the coast where they could catch fish in winter because there's always fish in the sea. Now, when you're living by the sea, particularly around the British coast where there are lots of seaweed, you're breathing in iodine with the seaweed. Your seaweed deteriorates, gives off the iodine, and by the coast you're breathing it. So it depends, but quite a few people near the coast, if there's lots of seaweed around and they're breathing, they might have enough iodine. But for those of us who live inland or don't eat sea fish, don't eat seaweed, probably there's iodine in various soils, but not always. There's iodine in certain foods, but not always. But my experience, mainly of giving people iodine and suddenly seeing the change, would lead me to believe it's most people. So anybody brushing their teeth in fluoride, which is a neurotoxin, they'll be low on iodine. Anybody who's bought any new furniture, soft furnishings, which have fire retardant on, which give out bromine, they'll be low on iodine. Anybody who swims in a swimming pool, anybody who drinks or bathes in water with chlorine, they're pretty much all of us are actually low on iodine unless we're really mindful about it.
Yeah, of course, the bromine is also in supermarket bread as well, isn't it? Not many people realise that.
Yeah, flour improver, they call it.
That's right. So just by eating the supermarket bread, you could be depleting yourself of iodine.
Let's say you go out to a cafe and have a cup of tea or a soup. Well, they won't have filtered that water, so that's going to be chlorine. We're really hit by poisons non-stop. So iodine, selenium, life-changing for a lot of people. Surprising.
Fantastic. So iodine is necessary for people that have hypothyroidism. But what about
both? Everybody, whether you've got a thyroid, whether they've removed it, whether it's functioning low, whether it's functioning high, everybody needs iodine. Doctors aren't taught enough about iodine. And years ago, I went down to my local GP and said, look, I've got no thyroid problem, but if I did have a thyroid problem and I asked you to give me iodine, would you? They said, no, we're not allowed to. We have to give drugs. We can't give iodine. Even though 100 years ago, 150 years ago, 180 years ago, his doctor predecessors would have given iodine, and they would have given, instead of levothyroxine, the patented drug, they would have given a natural bit of desiccated thyroid gland from a cow or a pig or something, which works much, much better than what the doctors give, of course, because it's a full spectrum.
It's a crazy world, isn't it? Okay, so let's move on to the menopause. We touched on that briefly a moment ago. Obviously, iodine is number one for anyone who's going through the menopause or approaching it. Um, is there anything else that you recommend for the menopause?
Well, some women use cohosh, uh,
Yes.
black cohosh,
Yeah.
um, and
I've
there are a number of materials out there.
yeah.
I mean, you know, let me give you a couple of clues. Some people get dry eyes. It's mainly women who get dry eyes, but men can get dry eyes as they get older as well. Do you know what they're lacking? They're lacking testosterone. If you're low on testosterone, you can get dry eyes. And
Wow.
so there are women who've worked this out. They get some natural uh, testosterone bioidentical cream, rub a tiny bit on their eyelids. Some of them will use testosterone in other ways, but both men and women can become low on testosterone. It's important for both of us. And the problem is all the estrogen. So
Mm,
if people aren't filtering their water properly, and the water's recycled through the sewage works, and they're getting the birth control pill, the most commonly sold pill in the world, then they're getting too much estrogen, which will knock out their testosterone. So a lot of men are drinking water out of plastic bottles, getting artificial estrogen. They're drinking, eating soya, artificial estrogens. They're bathing in birth control pill water,
mm,
drinking it. You
mm.
know, no wonder there's a gender confusion going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for many years, I was drinking water out of plastic bottles to avoid drinking the tap water. But now, obviously, I realise about the bisphenol A and the estrogen issue. So, what I'm doing at the moment is I'm distilling my water and then adding fulvic minerals or Celtic sea salt to the water. Is
Yeah.
that a method that's you would agree with?
Well, that's fine. I mean, the first thing is to work out, ask your water supplier how much, if any, recycled sewage is in there. Has it
Mm,
been through the plant or not?
mm,
And because the type of seriousness you want to put to whatever filter you want is going to vary depending on what you're dealing with. I
mm.
mean, the reason I don't like distilled is purely the noise that the water distiller makes, and it's going to cost you, now with electricity prices, it's going to cost you a fortune.
Yeah.
So I don't like that element. I've got, I have it on my site. It's called an Osmio Fusion, which is this little countertop thing that cost me about 75 quid to have it plumbed in, even though I rent the place. And you can press a button for cold water, warm water, herbal tea, temperature water, or boiling water. So I don't need a kettle anymore. And it's got 5 different little filters in it. Works great. But
Mm.
I'm lucky. My water is actually pretty pure anyway.
Right.
Um, but it's a lot cheaper and quicker
Mm.
than distillation. I find distillation just a pain, really. And I again put fulvic minerals or whatever I like
Yeah.
in there because distilled is empty.
Yeah.
Reverse osmosis is almost empty.
Mm.
And it's lost charge. In an ideal world, you'd vortex it and
Mm.
do all sorts of wonderful things to it, but not
Mm.
many people got the time. But a good filter, I think, is absolutely vital because we are mainly water after all.
Yeah.
Your brain,
Absolutely.
your eyes, we just don't want to poison ourselves any more than we are being
Yeah.
poisoned involuntarily.
Of course. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. I'd like to tell you a very short story about a friend of mine who had a very interesting experience a little while ago. He was a commercial airline pilot for over 40 years, and he was approaching retirement age. And he was landing the plane, parking it up, and suddenly thinking to himself, I can't remember the descent. I can't remember doing it. Oh dear, what's going on with me? His father had dementia, so obviously he was thinking, "Oh my God, what's going to happen?" sort of thing. Fortunately enough, he's a very intelligent guy, and he started to research this for himself, and he found out that dementia or the symptoms of dementia can often mimic a vitamin B12 deficiency. So he managed to find a very good vitamin B12 supplement, good dose, started taking it. And after a week or two, all symptoms were gone and he was back to normal, which is pretty amazing. But the very disturbing aspect of that story is how many people have ended up with a B12 deficiency, gone to their doctor, being diagnosed with a neurological condition, being placed on very strong and toxic drugs. I mean, that's a very, very scary thing to consider.
Well, absolutely, and it happens all the time because the doctor's numbers, they'll test you, and whereas I'd say, oh, you're low on B12, they'd say you're fine. You could be one hair above the minimum and you're fine, you know.
Yeah.
So it's not just, well, I mean, it's multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, all of those. So every vegan I know, every long-term vegan ran out of energy. B vitamins are about energy, and it's almost impossible unless you know what you're doing to get B12 in particular, unless you're eating animal products. So B12 deficiency is super serious, and it can be 10 years. The body is incredible at holding B12.
Yeah.
Really incredible. But when it goes, then you get diagnosed with something nasty unless you realize what's going on.
I absolutely agree with you on all that 100%. But the interesting thing about this guy that I'm talking about is that he was and still is a meat eater. And yet he must have been extremely low on B12, which I find a bit odd.
He was probably had digestive issues, probably for some reason not making the enzymes, the proteolytic enzymes needed to digest the protein. So he might have been going in one end of the tube, but maybe not going into the body, just coming right out the other end. You know, there's digesting it, then there's the ability to assimilate it actually into the cells.
Yeah.
So you know, anybody, let's say anybody over 50. If they want to live long, they could consider taking digestive enzymes with a meal, so that, because as we get older, we don't digest as well as we did when we were young. So there are a lot of people who like to take digestive enzymes with a meal because it helps them digest the food properly. And it may be that was the person's problem.
Yeah. Okay. That's
The lack of stomach acid. I mean, again, most people are told by a doctor if they've got acid reflux or GERD or bloating, oh, you're making too much stomach acid, because it's the opposite. So anybody who's not making enough stomach acid, well, of course, they're not going to be able to digest food.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of people.
Yeah, sure. I think I'm right in saying that magnesium can help a lot with acid reflux as well. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know how that works?
Well, yes, it's the alkalinity. There are various different ways you can create stomach acid, and traditionally you would use acid to create stomach acid. I mean, the idea of having a glass of lemon juice first thing in the morning or something, the idea of having a couple of tablespoonfuls of apple cider vinegar in a glass of water, say 25 minutes before a meal or something like that, it triggers the production of more stomach acid. As far as I'm aware, I'm not an absolute expert on this, but pretty much everybody who thinks they're making too much stomach acid, it's the reverse. And I mean, stomach acid is hydrochloric. You can get perfectly safe capsules of hydrochloric acid or hydrochloric acid tablets. You could take one of those before a meal if you wanted to. You could take betaine, which is an extract of beetroot. You can get capsules of betaine and pepsin, digestive enzymes, and you can take those with a meal. Or you could take a whole spectrum of digestive enzymes. Lots of ways to improve absorption.
Would there be like a number one recommendation that you would give people for acid reflux?
Well, yeah, understand there's not too much stomach acid, it's too little, and research natural ways to increase stomach acid. You go online, look at natural ways, and you'll find things like digestive enzymes, betaine and pepsin, or just changing your diet. Apple cider vinegar is a wonderful thing to fix.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
many things like that.
It's amazing stuff. Okay, I wanted to ask you today about C60. This is something that I haven't tried before, but I'm looking into. Now, I understand that you recommend the non-activated version of charcoal. Why is that, Clive?
Okay, so in the old days, when we were going to have dinner, we'd be sitting around the fire, breathing in charcoal dust like mad, wouldn't we?
Yeah,
Right, lots of charcoal dust. But now we sit around the television or whatever it is.
I don't.
The whole charcoal thing has disappeared. I mean, in the old days, again, let's say now we're not sitting around the fire anymore. We've got a stove on which we're cooking the food, and we would have used wood to do that. Now, when you've got to empty the wood fire, that ash, because minerals are not destroyed by heat, is rich in minerals. It's fantastic, really. So people used to go out and just sprinkle it all over the vegetable garden right outside the back door. Handy, convenient. You don't want to put in too much, but it's good for plant growth. And I met this Nigerian woman years ago who was in her 80s, and she said that where she grew up was deep in the jungle, and the tribe had no idea that there were oceans or seas. They didn't know they existed. I said, well, that's weird, because I thought everybody needed a little bit of salt to survive. And she said, well, we didn't know that salt existed, but what we did is after every meal, we'd take some ash. We'd get, after we'd cooked the meal, we'd get all the skins and all the leftovers and put them in the fire, in the embers to burn down to ash. Then we'd take that ash and put it in the next day's meal. That was their tradition, and obviously recycling the minerals, right?
Wow.
And I can't remember where I was going with that story now.
Well, we're talking about non-activated and activated.
Oh yeah, charcoal.
Yeah.
Right. So normal charcoal, you get some like old growth forest wood, old oak trees or whatever, something like that, and you burn that to you part burn it to charcoal, because it's not completely combusted, and that is an incredibly healthy product. Just real charcoal, if it's pure from it's really good, and because charcoal sucks toxins into itself and you can excrete them. And most of us these days are toxically poisoned one way or another. So some charcoal after a meal, for instance, can be really useful. I mean, from time to time, people come and visit me here at the house, and sometimes they've eaten out somewhere that they don't normally go to, and they've got a terrible stomachache. I might give them, depending on their size, 4 charcoal capsules. And often within 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I say, how's the tummy? Completely gone. Completely better. Charcoal can be fantastic for settling stomachs and so on, but it's good for a whole host of things. Anything dark, like coal, is full of minerals. You can tell by the color. You take a tomato that's bland and insipid and sort of pink colored, or a really nice tasting dark red one. So charcoal is incredibly important, but there used to be charcoal burners and you could buy your charcoal. Then an industrial method was invented using hydrochloric acid to turn charcoal into activated charcoal. Now, activated charcoal is about 4 times more effective at removing toxins than ordinary charcoal. But ordinary charcoal you can take every day of your life, no problem. Activated charcoal is so powerful, it pulls out the good stuff as well.
Right.
Activated charcoal regularly, you can deplete yourself of important nutrients. So that's why I don't like activated charcoal. However, if somebody came to me with desperately poisoned, and I had a choice, I give them activated, who cares? Lose some nutrients, let's save their life,
Right, yeah, sure.
So then there's a third type of C60, which is the nano C60. And I am, and various people I know, just feel intuitively nervous of that one. Partly because of the manufacturing methods of the nano C60. C60 is the structure of carbon. Carbon C60 looks like a sort of a football, lots of 60 different sides. Is the basis of a fullerene, Buckminster Fuller.
Yeah.
But the size of it, it's electrically, you can transmit electricity through it for instance, shungite.
Yeah.
Shungite contains C60, and it's electrically conductive. And my concern, and the concern of others, is if you're putting nano-sized, electrically conductive, minute amounts of carbon C60, which is not the human form of it, like charcoal, are you ever going to get it out again? Are you going to become a radio transmitter? So I've avoided C60, even though lots of people get great results from this nano stuff. I just prefer the old-fashioned charcoal. I think it's
Right, so that makes a lot of sense to me now. So with the non-activated version, you could take that quite happily and safely every day, and there wouldn't be.
You probably wouldn't be any point. You probably wouldn't want to, but you could, in theory. I've got a video about C60 charcoal online, which people could watch, where somebody who knows a lot more than I do explains the whole thing.
Brilliant. Okay. Thanks for clearing that one up. So let's talk about flu season, shall we? Because we're approaching winter in England at the moment. I would imagine by now that most people would understand the benefit of taking vitamin D3 and zinc for the immune system. I would imagine that most people, or at least some of my viewers now, would know about the Salinas pooling protocol for vitamin C, which can be of enormous benefit to people. But are there any other things that we could be looking at taking, using to either prevent cold or flu-like symptoms or treating cold and flus?
All right. Well, let's look at flu from a different perspective than normal. So imagine that somebody had accidentally poisoned themselves, right? They're poisoned. So what's the body going to do? Well, it might give you the shits. You might break out into sweat. The body would do everything it could to get rid of it. Probably come out through the lymph system. You might get a bad smell coming out. You would be breathing out the toxins, hopefully. You might be peeing them out. One way or another, the body might raise the temperature to try and get the toxins out. Let's say, bacterial infection. Let's say you're poisoned with a bacterial infection. The body's going to do all those things, everything it possibly can, to get the toxins out. So what is the flu? Is it some pesky virus that's come along and bitten you on the bottom? Or is it actually a detoxification event? So, I noticed 40 years ago or something, I noticed that so many of my friends, when they went on holiday, when they came back, they said, I caught a bloody cold from the air conditioning of the aeroplane. And the first 4 days, I arrived in my lovely place and I felt really rotten. And it occurred to me, could it be a relaxation detoxification event? So they get on the plane, they've probably been overworking, desperate to go on holiday, desperate to sit down on that plane and just relax. I made it. We didn't miss the flight. We're there on the way to holiday, and their body goes, wow, this person stopped working. They can be ill now for a bit because all they're going to do is lie on a beach and relax or something. Perfect time to have a detoxification, and out comes all that snot. You get a temperature, you're feeling awful, because to repair, you've got to rest, right? And so they end up in bed for a few days. And it struck me then, what if it's not something they caught from the air conditioning? Because not everybody catches it. Could it literally be a detoxification event? And to me, increasingly, that makes some sense as opposed to the traditional way of looking at it. And so when I started taking vitamin C seriously, you might say, I never got a cold or a flu or anything ever again.
Same here.
I used to get 3 a year. So what was it? Was it that the vitamin C was managing to detoxify me? Because that's what vitamin C does, amongst other things, detoxifies you. Was it, and I felt it was, that I was taking the vitamin C and that was all I needed. So I didn't need to have a flu or a cold because I had nothing to detox. I'd already got it out, neutralizing it with the vitamin C and magnesium and iodine. Now think about iodine for a minute. If you've got enough iodine in your thyroid, the blood every, whatever, 15 minutes or something passes through the thyroid. Now, if you've got enough iodine in the thyroid, let's say there's a rogue bacteria that's got in, you've eaten a poisoned prawn or something, well, every few minutes the bloodstream will go through the iodine, and the iodine, if you've got enough of it, will wipe out any bacteria you can think of. Yeah, nothing can. That's why they paint, before they do an operation in the hospital, they paint you with iodine with a big paintbrush to kill any nasty pathogens.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons people get ill. They haven't got enough iodine in their thyroid to knock stuff out, fungal infections, or whatever. You know.
There was a talk. I seem to remember during the pandemic, people were talking about iodine, weren't they, as a material that could help a lot with a certain disease beginning with C.
Yes. Well, when I started writing that that certain disease beginning with C could be reversed using vitamin C, I got attacked by almost every government agency in existence.
I bet.
Because that's what they didn't want. You know, there are a few things they didn't want you to know about ivermectin, but they particularly didn't want you to know about vitamin C. Ivermectin is a drug, but vitamin C isn't even a drug, and it's chips.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I didn't hear anybody talking about vitamin C apart from yourself. There was no one else talking about it. But that was go on.
Well, I'm sure there were, but they wouldn't have been on YouTube. So every time I put one up about vitamin C, they took it down like within 5 minutes. You know, it's there's keywords. I realised that I can't use any keyword beginning with C, basically.
Sure. Okay. So just to recap, Clive, as we approach flu season, we want to make sure that we stocked up on vitamin C, vitamin D, iodine, as you've just said. Is there anything else at all that we could have in our cabinets to help?
Well, I mean, there are a few things. Let me just first say that quality is everything. And vitamin C, I recommend pure powder. You know, taking one big capsule that effervesces and it's 1 gram, you might as well hardly not bother. To take a meaningful amount of vitamin C, you need to realize that maybe half a teaspoonful of pure powder, which is about 2 grams, 2.5 grams, twice a day might be ideal. Vitamin C only lasts about 12 hours in the body, so doing it twice a day would be ideal in water. And on my website, I do a few different types, and it explains, one's child friendly, the taste isn't too awful. Then there's one for sensitive stomachs. Then there's one that I like, which is just ascorbic acid.
Yeah.
But it's important to get the non-GMO one. And again, if somebody joined the Secret Health Club, there's so much information there about everything we're talking about, really.
Yes, and can I just say I'm a member, and it's absolutely amazing. It's fantastic. It's accelerated my learning in this field, just massive amounts. It's absolutely fantastic. You've got videos on there. You've got loads and loads of articles. You've got information on pretty much any type of condition or illness that you can think of. And obviously, I can't say too much on here on YouTube about it, but I would massively recommend that people look into it because it's been a revelation to me.
Well, when they first chucked me off YouTube in 2014, people think it's recent, but it's not. I realized that to keep my information available, that the best way was to start a private members club, because behind a club you can do pretty much anything you like. And so over the last 8 years since that happened, every time I see an article or a video where I go, wow, that's just brilliant, I'll put it up on the site, and I might take down one that I previously put up was slightly less brilliant, because what I'm trying not to do is to provide so much information you don't know where to start. So I'm trying to present relatively small amounts, but the quality stuff. If you see what I mean. And I've just listed it on A to Z. If Granny's got Alzheimer's, you look up Alzheimer's or whatever. And it does cost some money to join, but if you buy supplements, then we give discounts on the supplements. So it pretty much pays for itself.
And it's a lifetime membership as well, isn't it, Clive?
No, it used to be.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Now it's annual.
Yep. Fine. Okay. Brilliant. But yeah, I can't recommend it enough. I've literally lost hours in the day on Secret Health Club because you just learn so much on there. It's fantastic. Um, okay. Should we? Can I briefly just talk to you about children and supplements? Because quite a few of my customers have asked me about kids, and should I mean, what do you think about children taking supplements? Is it necessary? I mean, what would you say?
Well, as we discussed earlier about people who are older finding it more difficult to digest food, most kids can survive very happily on food that isn't that great because they're so good at getting all the nutrition out. But at the same time, quality of food has direct relationship to the quality of your brain and your intelligence and your ability to see and hear and do everything. So as far as supplements are concerned, frankly, I think that most children, just like most adults, are low on almost everything because the food isn't the quality that it should be. If your child's getting a school lunch, well, they're hardly going to be getting a decent meal.
Mm.
So yes, I think for some people, children do need supplements these days, as sad as that fact is.
Mhm.
I work it out by weight. If your child is a quarter of your weight, well, consider that maybe a quarter of whatever you take might be the right amount. The problem with supplements in children is some of them don't taste nice, and a lot of children don't want to take a capsule. Yeah,
Mhm.
there are often ways round it, but it can be tricky. But if your child's low on magnesium, for example, you can give them a magnesium chloride bath
Mm.
if they enjoy baths,
Yep.
and get it in that way rather than giving them capsules, which they might not take. Or you
Mm.
could get the liquid magnesium spray and rub it in, like a nice massage.
Mm.
And so, I mean, we've talked previously about the magnesium symptoms. Let's say your child isn't sleeping soundly, they're anxious, worried, nervous, they're constipated, they get cramps or menstrual cramps or twitches or spasms or hiccups, back pain, knee pain, depression, all the magnesium symptoms. You only need one of them to be low on magnesium, if you like. So it can help dramatically. I mean, anybody depressed, if your child's, look at children these days, they're all worried they're going to get blown up in a nuclear explosion and God knows what. And the
Mm.
parents are freaking out because they accidentally left a light bulb on last week. That might cost them £1,000. There's a great meme going around of this tramp sitting in the street, and this guy says, how did you end up here? And he said, I left a light bulb on.
No, I've seen that one. Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah.
So, children do need, well, let's say your child is going swimming regularly. Iodine would be a really great idea.
Yeah, because of
If
the
they don't
chlorine.
like drinking it in water, dilute it more. If they
Mm.
really don't like that, well, you can paint it on if you have to. But
Mm.
bearing in mind, you need about 8 times more that way because of the evaporation.
Mm.
Vitamin C, hopefully you might be able to find a way to slip some vitamin C into your child's drink or something.
Mm.
Again, diluted a lot. It doesn't taste nearly as bad as trying to knock back a strong amount.
Yeah, just in a cordial drink, a blackcurrant or something like that. Quarter of a teaspoon for a 7 or 8 year old, maybe once or twice a day would be okay.
Well, that might be too much. It
Right.
might be too much. Most people can handle, let's say, half a teaspoonful, but for a lot of people, quarter of a teaspoonful may be as much as their gut can handle, and they get diarrhea. So a child, you want to start really slowly, and an eighth of a teaspoonful might be the most you'd want to try to start with. But if you give your child a bottle of water to take to school, you could put some in the water.
Mm.
I would say 5 grams a day for an adult might be good. So, let's say the average child might weigh half your weight or something, then 2.5 grams is about half a teaspoonful. So maybe a quarter of a teaspoonful twice a day.
Sure.
But if a child's ill, let's say they've got the flu or something, going through some event, then they might need a lot more that day, loads more.
Mm.
And the body's self-regulating with magnesium and vitamin C. So you take too much at once or too much over a day, but the body self-regulates by putting you in the bathroom for a bit.
Of course, yeah. So I'm taking at the moment. I've just started taking 5,000 IU's of vitamin D a day. I will probably increase that probably after Christmas to maybe 10,000 a day.
For 20 quid, you could buy a test online and just do a finger prick and see if you got it right, too much, too little, whatever.
Sure, okay. I was just thinking about children and vitamin D. I mean,
Well, they need it as much as anybody. They
yeah,
really do.
sure.
Um, so again, Secret Health Club's got information about vitamin D. If you wanted to look online for information, Dr. Mercola has got a lot of information published about vitamin D, which I think is pretty good. Is that
Yep.
beeping your end or my
It's
end?
my end, Clive. Carry on, please.
So yeah, finding the right dose. The dose that we sell is an adult dose. That would be much too much. But the least expensive vitamin D, which is fine, comes in little gel caps, and you could get a very sharp knife and cut it open. There's like a blob of oil in there, which would be a big dose. You could just cut that oil into a quarter and put it in any water, juice, anything, it's pretty much tasteless. You can put it on the child's tongue. Yeah, it's usually easy to cut things in half and dilute them. Some things like magnesium capsules, you open them up, they taste disgusting.
Yeah, I know this because on one occasion, I late at night, I should add, I went to have a drink of blackcurrant, and I thought I was putting some vitamin C in there, and I actually put in magnesium L-threonate, and it was disgusting.
Yes, well, exactly. So again, the answer is to go back to rubbing it on the skin of the child. If they won't take a capsule or a magnesium bath, rubbing it on is much cheaper than taking a bath of it.
Yeah,
But you
thanks,
need a
Clive.
lot in a bath. You might need up to 1 kilo in a bath. It costs about £1 a kilo. You can buy magnesium chloride from companies like Intralabs, otherwise known as Dead Sea salts. That's
Yeah,
about
that's
30
good.
quid. You can buy 25 kilos delivered, probably. So it's dead cheap.
Yeah,
Personally, I don't like taking magnesium baths because you come out sticky, and I don't terribly like it. And I haven't got the patience to sit around in a hot bath for long enough.
Oh, I love a hot bath, but there we are. Okay, should we move on to diet now and food?
Sure.
For the last few months, 2 or 3 months, I've been eating more red meat, and I'm kind of moving towards a carnivore, or largely a carnivorous diet. And I have to say that I'm feeling absolutely fantastic. I've never felt better, or not for a very long time anyway. But I also grow my own food. I'm growing my own vegetables, potatoes, tomatoes, fruits, etc. Um, Recently, I found out about the oxalate issue in certain foods, particularly things like spinach, chard, potatoes, chocolate, even things like this. So, if, as far as I'm aware, I've got a pretty decent gut health going on. I don't have any gut health issues as far as I know. So, should I be avoiding foods that are high in oxalates, like the ones I just listed? Or is it okay for somebody with normal gut health to enjoy those foods? What would you say?
Well, I would say everything in moderation. A few years ago, I was out in Mexico for a conference, and my friend, we had lunch at like this buffet, and it was incredible. He was just loading himself up with greenery, nothing else, just greens. Personally, my idea of eating kale, I don't like kale. Anyway, he was knocking back all this stuff, and he rings me up about 3 weeks later and said, "You never guess what happened." He said he ended up in hospital. He decided to go on a diet of spinach, kale, cruciferous vegetables, nuts and seeds, and he hadn't realized that every food he'd chosen was rich in oxalates. And the reason he ended up in hospital was kidney stones. He was in outrageous pain because he'd eaten too many oxalates. But I mean, he'd gone pretty crazy with it. But let's say somebody who has a green juice every morning, spinach, kale, cruciferous vegetables,
Yeah.
they're in danger of getting too much oxalates.
Well, actually, I was doing a green juice almost every day for probably about 4 or 5 years, up until about a year ago when I found out about the oxalates. So I stopped that immediately. So I'm probably just very fortunate that I got away with that. So So what you're basically saying is for somebody with normal gut health, eating spinach maybe once a week is nothing to worry about, probably. Yeah.
That's what I believe. Funnily enough, I had some spinach for lunch. So
Oh, did you? Well, you look all right. So
you're right.
yeah. Okay. And obviously, like potatoes as well, because I do like my potatoes, mashed potatoes every now and again. So yeah, it would be awful to have to give them up altogether. And I've just grown sackloads worth of them as well. So so that's good to know that. But if somebody's got a gut health issue, then really they should be avoiding those foods, shouldn't they? High oxalate foods.
Well, if they got a gut health issue, they want to repair the gut, and that may not be difficult. I mean, water kefir, I think, is a great material.
Mhm.
Probiotic foods or probiotic supplements. I mean, what people don't fully understand is what the gut lining is. And when somebody says, I've got a leaky gut, what actually is going on? So if somebody's got a leaky gut, what's actually happening is that microscopic pieces of feces are traveling around the bloodstream and entering the brain.
Yeah.
Because if you've got a leaky gut, you've got a leaky gut brain barrier, the gut brain barrier, right?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
you've heard the phrase shit for brains.
Yeah.
That's a problem when you've got a leaky gut.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Thanks.
But there are all sorts of things that can fix it. I mean, fulvic minerals
Yeah. Yeah.
are great for fixing, for getting, you want tight junctions, and that's what
Mm.
fulvic minerals can do. First of all, fix that. I wouldn't be so worried about the oxalate part of it. I'd just be concerned to try and fix the leaks.
The gut. Sure. Okay. And you mentioned fulvic minerals, and that just reminded me of something we were talking about earlier. Um, am I right in saying that you could? Because I try to eat as organically as possible. Obviously, I'm growing my food that way, and I'm fussy about what I buy. But if I was to go out for a meal at a local restaurant, I don't know how the food's been cooked, where it's come from, how it's been sourced, etc. Chances are that I'm going to be eating food that's been sprayed with glyphosate and other nasties. So, am I right in saying that fulvic minerals can eliminate glyphosate or neutralize glyphosate?
They will go some way to making the glyphosate safe, to change its structure.
Sure.
Charcoal will do it. I mean, there are a number of actual materials that will get glyphosate out of your body. I'm told it only has about a month's life in the body anyway. So,
Right.
but yeah, fulvic minerals would be my top choice if I'd been out to a meal and I thought, well, there was glyphosate in that for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, fulvic minerals is my top choice. In water, maybe 10 drops. You could do 10 drops 3 times a day if you're particularly concerned.
Oh, really? Okay, that's good to know. Okay. Urine therapy. This is something that I've come across recently. One or two guests of mine on the channel have talked briefly about it and have advocated doing it. What are your thoughts on urine therapy, Clive?
It tastes better when it's cooled down in the fridge than it does when it's warm.
Right.
And it's
Okay.
not my favorite therapy, but I have tried it, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, I tried it mainly because of Dave Murphy, allegedly Dave.
I
You
don't
come
think I've
Dave
come across
Murphy.
him. No, sorry.
Anyway, so I don't know, it must have been years ago, he told me this story. He'd decided that he wouldn't just do urine therapy, that he would not drink anything or eat anything except recycle his own urine over and over and over again.
Wow.
So after 2 weeks, he said that he was then 40 or something. He said he could do yoga moves that he hadn't been able to do for 20 years. His body had freed itself up. And his girlfriend apparently was very, very pleased about something that had changed, I think. And after about 28 days, he was feeling absolutely incredible. Any little issues he'd had were gone. And
And
I think you'd want to
yeah.
be well hydrated before you start.
Okay.
I mean, so many people have been using urine therapy
Mm.
for forever.
Thousands of years, literally. I
Yeah.
understand it was there were actually medical centers, I think, in India for many years or many centuries that focused primarily on urine therapy as a way of getting people better. So it's
Yeah.
a very long and old tradition, isn't it? But just on the surface of it, when I first heard about it, I sort of scratched my head and thought, well, hold on a minute. I thought we were excreting toxins when we urinated. So
No,
how
that comes out the back end.
right? Okay.
What comes out in the urine is the excesses. So you have too much B vitamins, then your pee can come out yellow. There are but the good stuff comes out in the urine, which is why it can be recycled. The bad stuff comes out the back end.
Wow. Okay, that's very interesting. So I'll be trying that and reporting back on that one to see what results I can share. Yeah. Okay. So before we close, Clive, I'd like to talk to you about something that's, I suppose, non-health related, really. The tipping point. 2.5 years ago, it's been a very interesting 2.5 years. When the pandemic started, the government red pilled a multitude of people, and I've been awake for around 15 years or so now, and I thought, wow, this could be the moment. This could be it. We may now have reached the tipping point. So do you think we're there yet? Do you think the tipping point's even important? Do you think it's a myth? What are your thoughts on the tipping point, and how close are we to being really challenging the way that the world is run?
Well, for the last 2.5 years, I've been making videos trying to wake people up, and I now realized I was, to a large degree, wasting my time.
Okay.
They're too deeply hypnotized. I think what's going to happen is that everybody's going to wake up worldwide, and they're all going to hate their government for everything that they've done.
Mhm.
And Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum are going to come in and say, look, as you all know, all your governments are useless and have got it wrong. Here's 1,000 credits, digital credits for your new account we're going to open. Cash is going to be withdrawn and everything will be fantastic. You'll own nothing and be happy.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the current level of intelligence that people have got, they'll go with it.
Yeah.
And
So, in other words, you think that the last 2.5 years have been engineered basically to achieve what you were just saying, that end
well, the
result.
last 25 years or more,
Yeah.
this is not new. The governments aren't making mistakes.
Mhm.
Putin's a global World Economic Forum young leader, just like Macron, just like Truss, just like all of them.
Mhm.
The whole political system is infiltrated and evil, corrupted, nasty mess. And I'm hoping that the people will yet wake up to the fact that the problem is government. The
Mm.
only solution that I can see is that every government worldwide has to be disbanded and we go back to local. I think the EU is likely to break up. Italy was 18 principalities up till the end of the last century or something. I think people are going to realize that we're better off without these idiots. But if they bring in fuel rationing, food rationing, and you've got to get a digital passport to get it, then we're fucked. At that
Yeah.
point,
Absolutely.
freedom is lost.
Yeah.
So the answers are things like the Bradbury pound. Do you know about the Bradbury pound?
Yes, I've heard of it. That was a currency in this country that was issued. Was it around World War II or just prior
No, it's
to
World
World
War One. It was
War? Sorry. Yeah.
the world was waking up to the fact that World War One was coming,
Mhm.
and obviously everybody was panicking, wanted their gold out the bank, and of course the banks don't have the gold, so it would have been a disaster. It would have been total chaos. All the banks would have gone bust. All the people, it would have been the end of commercial Britain.
Mhm.
So it just so happened that the bankers came to the government, said, help us. And the government had to, they had no choice. And so it happened to be on a bank holiday. So they extended the bank holiday for another 3 days. And by the end of that, they'd managed to print brand new banknotes. So instead of the Bank of England printing the money with interest, the government itself printed the money without interest themselves. just like you do with coins. The Royal Mint print the coins. There's no interest on coins. It's the banks who print the notes, and there's interest on that. So the government printed interest-free money. So on the first day, they didn't have time, so they were only printed on one side, the banknotes. On the second day, they printed on both sides. And the worry was for the Bank of England and the government, would the people of the country accept these new bits of paper? Only bits of paper. But they were backed not by imaginary gold that the bankers claimed they had in the vaults, which they didn't because of fractional reserve banking and theft. The Bradbury pound and I think the Secretary of State or whoever was called Bradbury, John Bradbury, that's why it was nicknamed the Bradbury pound. The government printed the money against the value of UK. Like the UK has got buildings, roads, infrastructure, farms, intelligent people. England, the UK is worth trillions and trillions and trillions. You can borrow money against that because it's rock solid, right? Unlike the banks. So the same thing happened with the Civil War. Jefferson, I believe, had created the greenback dollar, which was again interest-free money, and the bankers assassinated Lincoln eventually. The bankers always want money for war. The English bankers and government wanted World War I, so they had to create lots of money, and the Civil War was also funded by this off-balance sheet government printed money, so to speak. Off-balance sheet is probably the wrong word. And we could do that again. Every country in the world, I want to get rid of all governments, but let's say that doesn't happen. We've got to live with governments. The people need to tell the governments, insist that they stop usury. When was the only time that Jesus got pissed off? When he threw the bankers out the temple, right, for lending money at interest. We don't need to pay interest to psychopathic criminal bankers. Governments can print the money against the value of England, and we can create value rather than creating debt. When the banks print the money, they don't print the interest. So people are constantly going bust because the interest doesn't exist. There's never enough money to go around, except when they print it and flood it and dilute everybody's. So the Bradbury pound, I made a video about it on odyssey.com. Check it out, because it really is about the only answer left, that if government stays, the only way to not go down the social credit, digital currency route. The Bradbury pound is fantastic.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you that governments have to go. I'm very much an anarchist in the old sense of the word, definitely. What you were talking about with the Bradbury pound reminded me a little bit of what was occurring. I'm being a bit risky here because it's YouTube, but what was occurring in Germany in the 1930s? Didn't they do something quite fairly similar to?
Well, yes, the man with the moustache. While it's a hugely complex interweb of stories, the reason that Germany was able to recover was because of low interest money.
Yeah,
partly, and that's one of the reasons that the German right got smashed. Anybody who hasn't read revisionist history like David Irving needs to work out what really happened in Second World War, because the winners tell the story, and the story of World War II is not at all what we're told. It's all very different.
David Irvine. And of course, I started to come across this information by watching a documentary, a very long one called The Greatest Story Never Told. I'm not sure if that's still online anywhere, but my God, was that
not going to be on YouTube, that's for sure.
No, definitely not. No, the last I heard it was on Daily Motion. But if anyone wants to sort of look into revised history, that might be a very good place to start. Anyway, Clive, before we get thrown off, shall we leave it there? And thank you so much for coming on with me today and sparing your time, your precious time. I'd recommend anyone checks out Clive's channel on Odyssey. It's very, very good. And just thank you for everything you're doing, Clive. You've been a massive influence on my life in the last 10 years. So just keep doing what you're doing, and thank you very, very much for your time.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, everyone. Please like, share, and subscribe.